Okay.
So we will see if everyone managed to find us today, since we had a little bit of technical difficulties with Facebook Live Producer. But as you all know, we are always available on replay, and it will be on YouTube in a couple of hours. So super exciting time today. This is series number 3 of our lives. Who knew when I was challenged to do a live back in July, this would be the 3rd series in this calendar year. So super excited to start this new series, and it's going to be focused this time on leadership. So the first 2 series, we really focused on teamwork and collaboration, especially with everything that happened in 2020. That seemed to be a relevant topic and focus. But as we shift into 2021, we're going to shift our focus to leadership. And how do we change how we approach leadership going into 2021 and get a jump start on new year, new you, new leadership? So today, also monumental, for the first time ever, I have a guest on my lives. Who knows, maybe that will become a thing too. And today I have Kyle Richardson joining me from the UK. And we are going to talk a little bit about mindfulness in leadership and how we approach change as leaders. Also shocking for those of you who watch this, I'm not going to do all the talking. So I'm going to let Kyle do quite a bit of the talking. I have a couple questions I want to ask him to help us guide this discussion. And then at the end of the live, I will tell you about what's coming up for the rest of the series. So Kyle, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
All right, so you and I have been having these conversations about leadership and mindfulness for quite a while now. For those of you who don't know, Kyle is also one of our guest bloggers and contributes quite regularly on the topic of leadership and mindfulness. And we have a blog coming out tomorrow that Kyle has authored that is related to this topic as well. So you guys can get a bit more information tomorrow to follow on with today's live. But Kyle, my first question for you is, what do you see as the most important thing for leaders who are trying to lead change?
I think for me, it's simple. It starts with you. It starts with them. It's about recognizing that they have to be in the right space themselves. You know, they have to be able to build that value proposition for change. They have to be able to explain that clearly to people, and to do that, they really need to make some time themselves to step back, to be able to assess the status quo, to understand what's good about where they currently are, what things they don't want to lose. And yeah, I think you have to make a mindset shift. So you have to stop living in that kind of rat race where you're always rushing from one thing for another and you never have enough time, because that doesn't leave you able to really be the best that you are. So I think you've got to step back a little bit and say, okay, nothing changes. If nothing could change, if I couldn't influence a single thing, what I have right now would be exactly enough, right? Like it would have to be. You'd have no choice. How do you maximize that? So how do you like really seriously challenge yourself that nothing is ever going to move forward ever again? You are stuck in this position. So make the most of it, learn to love it, and from that identify what's really, really good about what you've got. So build that strong base. I don't think we don't make enough time for that. Once you've done that, then you're in a better position to frame the why. You know, if you can't explain why we want to move forward, why we want to make a change, no one's going to listen to you. And why would they? Why would you listen to yourself, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a really critical point, because I think as leaders, we tend to get wrapped up in the concept of change. We have to fix things. We have to change. We have to keep moving forward. And we're going to be seen as failures as leaders if we're not constantly on the perpetual, gerbil wheel, if you will, because aren't leaders supposed to be busy and moving and changing?
Yeah.
And like you said, we don't take the time to reflect, to get inside our own head space and figure out where we are. So that kind of leads me to my next question. What do you see, and you touched on it a bit, but what do you see as a big obstacle to this?
Wow. Well, I guess, busyness, that idea of, people get stuck in this little strange little world of it. If I'm not busy enough, people won't think I'm I'm valuable enough. People won't think I'm getting enough done somehow. You have to step back from that busyness. You need space, you need stillness. I mean, for me, that's what the mindfulness approach is all about. If you can't create some stillness, you can't really create effectively and efficiently, and you can't have a vision of the future. And it's weird. I'm sort of talking about not making a change, but at the same time, this is a change cycle in itself. And this is the change cycle that as leaders, we should be focused on. Rather than constantly trying to move the world around us, move the teams around us, make that cycle really small. We can constantly be working on ourselves. We can constantly be working on our mindset. It's totally within our control. There's no external influences. There's no worries about other people and what other people think, what organizations think. It's all about us. And I think the thing that sometimes holds us back there is fear, to be honest. You know, we get scared of not being seen in a certain role, not being seen to fulfill a certain proposition, to tick these boxes. And a lot of these fears are really small, right? So they're like, you know, I'm kind of scared that I might not be perceived a certain way. And we don't treat that as a fear. We just go, oh yeah, I have to make sure I'm always moving the team forward. I have to make sure I'm always having these conversations. We make excuses because we don't want to recognize our fears. We often don't want to recognize our fears because of it. It's all to do with, especially with men. I can't talk so much from a woman's perspective, but you know, I know us guys, we're always raised with this idea that, you know, having any kind of fear, that's a sign of weakness. You want to avoid that. But in all honesty, as leaders, we have to be brave enough to embrace that, to recognize that these fears, these excuses are what holds us back.
Yeah, I think for women, we've been so conditioned that in the workplace, we have to be 10 steps ahead of the men to be treated equally. Yeah. So I think we get in that same cycle of that perpetual thought process as well. But what can people do to break that cycle? What can they do to stop the perpetual motion of perceived change or perceived success, to really get to that point where they recognize that the first step is taking a pause and centering?
So I guess, yeah, I guess I'll trot out the word courage, and then I'll pause and let everyone have their eyes roll a little bit, like, okay, that's so practical. But it is true. You know, you have to be brave enough to face up to your fears, to be able to vocalize those fears to others, to be vulnerable enough to your team, especially. I mean, you know, one way to really connect with your team, to really get them on the, you know, on the same path as you want to be on, is to make it clear that, you know, you don't have all the answers, but you're brave enough to push in a direction because you can see a value in going that way. So I think courage, but I think there are some, you know, there are some real practical steps, and that a lot of that is about mindset. And for me, a lot of that is about, again, that whole idea of making some stillness in your life, being able to step back, being brave enough to step back and say, you know what, I'm going to avoid these meetings today. I'm going to avoid these tasks that I don't believe are contributing to taking me forward, and therefore they're not likely to contribute to me taking my team forward. And try and practice that mindset that what you have right now, what you are, is enough. That you don't need excuses. That excuses just hold you back. You know, they keep you in this state of inaction, and you want to be in a state of action, but you want to be in a state of positive action.
Yeah, I think that you did that last part, just hit on something, because when you said you want to be in a state of action, people perceive the state of action as being the state of busy. And those are definitely, to me anyway, not anywhere near the same thing. And I hear leaders tell me all the time that they don't have time to invest in themselves, or they don't have time to make change, or they don't have time to do all of these different things because they're busy, because they've got too much going on. And that is not a state of action. That is a state of busy. Yeah. And I think that's one place that people can start breaking the cycle. Like you said, do you have all these activities teed up for the day? What value do they bring? And what would happen if you just didn't do them? Yeah. And I think that's a scary place for people. Saying no, or just not doing things that don't bring value, I think people are afraid. I think they're afraid to say no for fear of how they're going to be perceived. But at some point, I think we have to put the brakes on. And like you said, there's activity, and like I said, there's busy. How do you get into that state of action where what you're doing is mindful and meaningful? And I think that is where we need to start to reflect. If you can't tick a box next to the busy to show that it's providing value, you need to start reflecting on those things. And I think that, like you said, that does take courage. It takes courage to stand up to a hierarchy that's built on leaders having to be busy to prove their worth. Yeah.
Sometimes I think I can't think who the quote comes from, but there's that expression, sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. And I think it's hard for people to accept that. When I was reading something the other day, it's an old essay, a 2009 essay by a guy called Paul Graham. He's one of the founders of Y Combinator, the VC firm. And for anyone who's listening who hasn't heard of Y Combinator, they should look them up. They're pretty cool. They fund a lot of real small startups, and they've funded some really cool things over the years. So one of the things that he wrote about back in 2009, he wrote this essay about the difference in how we perceive time between whether we're a maker or a manager. And this idea that managers live on this little microcycle of busyness, right? Like, you jump from this half-hour time slot to the next half-hour time slot. And makers, people that create things, people that are in a creative workflow, which a lot of the people in the agile space are trying to be both managers and makers. And that's quite hard, because the natural inclination for someone who's trying to create things is to have really big time slots, like minimum half a day was what he suggested. Ideally, you want to be able to mark out whole days where no one gets to interrupt you. And that's for me, that essay, when I was reading, it's a really good illustration of exactly how that busyness holds us back. When you're in these little half-hour, or I know some people who work on 15-minute time slots. That's insane, right? How do you contemplate anything in 15 minutes? And when you push yourself into that metric, into that continual cycle of slots all day, every day, you're degrading your ability to step back and think. You're almost handicapping yourself.
Yeah, it's just like people saying, oh, I can multitask. No, you can flail your arms around and do a whole lot of things at one time, but you're not putting your full worth and value into any of them. You're just shuffling and moving them around to get the boxes ticked. So I think that's a good place to end. If you could give people one small piece of advice on how to break the cycle, just as a wrap up, what would you suggest they do first?
Wow.
I know I put you on the spot.
Okay, so I guess I'll pick up on exactly where you were at with the whole multitasking thing. People, be honest. I'll be honest. I cannot multitask. What I can do, and what I will honestly admit to, is I can do a whole lot of things all at once really badly. So just stop it. Just put it all down. Be present in everything you do. If you're having a meeting with someone, like this one-on-one type thing, be 100% focused on that. Everything else just stops. If things mount up, things mount up. Start learning to prioritize things and take them one at a time, and take the time to reflect afterwards on how much better those connections are that you make with people, those experiences you have. Make time. That's the thing.
Yeah, I think that's great. A couple months ago, I issued everyone a meeting reduction challenge to reduce the number of meetings and ensure the ones you have value. And I think it's kind of the same thing, but from a more personal perspective, is do one thing at a time and do it well.
Yeah. And if you're struggling, like I know when you had that meeting reduction challenge, I put my hand up and had a horrible number. And then the other day, I know we were talking, actually last week we were talking, weren't we? And I had to admit that I'd had a day of 13 meetings or something insane.
Yes, it was some crazy number.
Yeah. So just to make sure I'm not being a complete hypocrite here. What I'm recognizing is that sometimes you'll work in a business environment where you're not given the ability to dodge a whole ton of meetings. So, okay, and everyone's going to have that. But I think what you can do, what you can manipulate that system. So yeah, you might have a day where you have back-to-back meetings and you just are longing for a bathroom break, and that might be maybe the worst day of your week, and it might be the day where you wish afterwards that you'd been more present or you'd had more time. But you'll do that so that you can take another day in your week and free it up. Have a whole half a day, or have a whole day, even better, where there is nothing scheduled meeting wise, and you can be free to create and you can think about that bigger picture.
Yeah. So we have to be brave enough and courageous enough to take that first step and then be present and focused in everything we do. Try that and then evaluate what's the difference. How do you feel? How do the people around you feel? And I think that's a good place for me to talk about what's coming up next. So the next few lives that we're going to be doing are going to be talking about mindset and how you evaluate how you're showing up and what biases you're bringing to situations, what outside influences may dictate how you react to something, and how you really change your focus and how you want to be as a leader. So I think this was a good conversation to get started, to give people something to think about. I think we're going to probably have a lot of questions. But as a reminder, Kyle's blog comes out tomorrow. I think you guys are going to find it interesting because it does talk about change, or the need to not change, and staying in ourselves and reflecting on where we want to be. We also have The Art of Mindful Leadership coming out in 2021. And on learning.agilityforall.com, there is a pre-sign up that does not commit you to attending the group coaching, but it does get you all the announcements and some free content that we're going to put out there to help you start thinking about how you show up as a leader. So please go to learning.agilityforall.com and sign up for that pre-notification and freebies. Next week, like I said, we're going to be talking about what is a leadership mindset. We hear people say mindset all the time. What does that even mean? And what are we supposed to be doing with it? And as always, you can follow us on all the socials: Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. So we are going to say goodbye for today. Kyle, thank you so much for joining on the first live of Series 3. I am excited about these topics, and let's talk soon.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.